Welcome back to History on a Hod. I'm Cap'n Boz. In the last episode, we saw how General Andrew Jackson and his combined army, made up of U.S. Army regular troops and the collective militia regiments of Tennessee, Kentucky, and most of the southern states. Remember those boys whose fighting spirit was bolstered by their strong moonshine? Anyways, how Jackson and this combined force had initiated an unauthorized incursion into Spanish Florida and attacked Pensacola in order to remove the British threat there. Officially, Jackson had been warned many times by his superiors in Washington that he was not to cross the international boundary with Spanish Florida. But Jackson realized that the British threat to the United States in the South was too dangerous to ignore. And so, on November 6th and 7th of 1814, Jackson initiated his attack on Pensacola. By all accounts, the American attack was a complete surprise. The British and their Spanish allies were completely caught off guard, and after seeing the large American force, the British commander prudently withdrew most of his troops from the main city fort, Fort San Miguel, or Fort George as the British referred to it, leaving primarily the Spanish troops to deal with the Americans. After a short but fierce street battle, the Spanish troops ultimately surrendered themselves and Fort San Miguel, or Fort George, to General Jackson. Fort George was now American. But the fight for Pensacola wasn't over yet. Jackson and his troops would need to attack and remove the remaining British troops that had withdrawn into the confines of Fort Barrancas, guarding the mouth of Pensacola Bay, some 14 miles away. Not only would Jackson need to defeat the British Army there, but he would need to scare off the Royal Navy flotilla that had anchored just offshore. It looked like a very daunting task for Jackson and his men.
I'm standing here on the grounds of the National Historic Park of Fort Barrancas, which was then known as Fort San Carlos by the Spanish in 1814. This historical fort is located inside the wire of the U.S. Navy's Air Station Pensacola, where the Navy teaches its pilots to fly. As you can see, the fort still has an impressive and imposing view of the entrance to Pensacola Bay. You can see why this was a feared and formidable defensive fortification in 1814. Although much of what you see today are the remnants from the Civil War period, this Civil War fort was built on top of the old Spanish fort that was located here, on this spot. So, this was the location of the fort during Jackson's attack on Pensacola. By November 8th, the day after the successful attack on Fort San Miguel, Jackson planned to capture this fort by storm and hand the British a crippling defeat, perhaps even capturing some of the British Royal Navy ships that were lying in anchor right over there. Those Royal Navy vessels had repositioned during the night from the Pensacola harbor to here, just off Fort San Carlos. What Jackson feared the most was the cannon artillery support those ships could provide to the British troops defending this fort. 4 frigates could provide a lot of firepower. During that same evening, Jackson sent a message to the British commander here at Fort San Carlos and demanded the surrender of the fort. He received no reply. He heard nothing but crickets. But on the following day, just before Jackson could launch the attack and move on Fort San Carlos, the British and Spanish troops abandoned the fort and escaped to the frigates. Just before setting sail and departing, the British rear guard blew it up, totally destroying the fort. The British wanted to make it useless to the Americans. Reports and engravings of the event tell us it was a massive explosion. And as the smoke cleared, the Americans watched as the British ships sailed past the mouth of Pensacola Bay and put out to sea. But the Americans, with General Jackson in command, had won another tremendous victory against the British in the South.
The forcible removal of the British by Jackson from Pensacola had again disrupted their southern invasion plans. They would now have to bypass Mobile and be required to assault New Orleans from the sea, a much more difficult and riskier option. Jackson had done it to them again. But Jackson also knew the celebration of the victory in Pensacola would have to wait. The British would certainly move on New Orleans very soon.
The day after the destruction of Fort San Carlos, Jackson would abandon Pensacola to the Spanish and set out for his headquarters in Mobile. Upon reaching Mobile, he received numerous dispatches from Washington to hurry to the defense of New Orleans. The British were already on the move. And the rest, as they say, is history. As many of you know, General Andrew Jackson's badly outnumbered army of misfits, along with Jean Lafitte's Bayou Pirates, would stun the world by defeating the greatest army of the time. These were the same British units that had just defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. They were better armed, better equipped, and a much larger force than the relatively small American force that opposed them at Chalmette Plantation, south of New Orleans, on January 8, 1815. Neither side had heard that a peace agreement had already been signed in Belgium, ending the war. The battle did not have to be fought.
But it had been fought, and it was a decisive American victory. The ragtag American army had given the cream of the British army a resounding defeat, and they wanted revenge. After withdrawing from New Orleans, the British commanders were already busy planning another attack. But before any serious plan could be put into action, the British ship HMS Brazen arrived from England. She brought news that the war was over. A peace treaty had been signed at Ghent on December 24, 1814, a month before the Battle of New Orleans took place. The British were ordered to end all hostilities and sail for home, to England. The War of 1812 was officially over. In the end, the Americans earned the respect of the British, and the British would never militarily challenge the Americans ever again.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the series. I certainly enjoyed putting it together for you. You know, I love this part of the country. Mrs. Cap'n Boz and I lived in Alabama for over 13 years between my Army and Coast Guard careers. So coming back here is like coming home. And I love riding around here. There's plenty of history all throughout the Gulf Coast, so you should check it out.
So as I wrap up the series, let's take a quick look at a map of all these places that I visited. As you can see from this animation on a wide view of the area that I covered, you see it's fairly large. So if you're going to ride it, be prepared to spend at least several days riding this route. Just plug in the addresses of the historical locations that will pop up on the maps here and let your GPS do all the work. Let's start at Talladega. You'll find a commemorative plaque located at the county courthouse in the city's downtown. Only this one plaque tells the story of the battle here. When you're ready, ride south and work your way to Horseshoe Bend National Military Battlefield in Daviston, Alabama. After this visit, continue to ride further south and go visit Fort Mims in Stockton. It's out in the boonies, and the fort is located in a trailer park there. So don't be confused when your GPS takes you there. From here, head south on I-65 to Mobile and go to the old part of the city to visit Fort Conde. The next stop will be the Village Point Park Preserve, the park where the Jackson oak tree stands in Daphne, Alabama, on the other side of Mobile Bay. You will have to dismount here and walk in about 100 yards to view the tree. When you're finished in Daphne, head south on Highway 98 towards Gulf Shores, Alabama, and there pick up Highway 180, which will take you out to the Fort Morgan State Historic Site, the location of the former Fort Boyer and the battle there. When you're ready, reverse your course and ride back through Gulf Shores, picking up the coastal highway and work your way over towards Naval Air Station Pensacola, where Fort Barrancas is located. You will have to enter the military base to get to the fort. The military policeman at the gate will direct you over to a building to get a vehicle pass. Then follow your GPS over to the fort. When you're through here, work your way over to Fort George in downtown Pensacola to check out the former location of the fort. There's not much left of it, but there is a memorial park commemorating the various military events throughout the history of Pensacola. After finishing in Pensacola, work your way north and get onto I-10 West and follow it towards New Orleans. Punch in the Chalmette Battlefield Park in Chalmette, Louisiana into your GPS. It's just south of New Orleans. And go see the place where Andrew Jackson won his greatest victory over the British Army. When you're finished, head back into New Orleans, into the French Quarter, and raise a toast to your journey.
And do me a favor, please stay tuned, as I'm already hard at work on my next series. And don't forget, ride safe. See you next time on History on a Hog.